Hunters, it is your turn to get a full summary of all the changes coming for Hunters, whether it's their exotics, their melee abilities, their melee exotics, and just everything else. This is coming last out of the 3 classes, but it's because I covered Hunters first, the stats rework, and showed off some builds for them. So I'll be going through all the changes coming in Edge of Fate for Hunters, and I will also be sharing 7 builds, which is a lot. 2 of those are repeats of my last Hunter video, so if you've seen that, that'll cover most of the details, and I'll briefly go through them, but not too much detail. But hopefully this helps you get some ideas for what to build craft with in Edge of Fate and figure out how the new stat system works. If you have any questions on that, I have lots of videos on the stat system and a very nice build planner that I will link in the description. Now, if all that sounds good to you, let's get into it. I'm Engineer. So here's an overview of what I'm going over. As I mentioned, going over the melee changes, the Hunter exotic reworks, and other changes. You can also see all 7 builds that I will be covering here. A few disclaimers before we get into this. This is pre-release and things may change. So once Edge of Fate launches, take everything with a little bit of grain of salt. I only cover PvE. I don't play PvP very much, but most of the changes here are for PvE only, so I don't think it's going to affect too much. All the stat benefit assumptions are based on current best estimate math. I have a whole video called Math Updates that goes through all that, but I will be updating all my tools and all my information as we learn more. I'm hoping once I get into Edge of Fate to do some testing and really nail this stuff down pretty quickly. Lastly, if you're not familiar with my videos, there will be timestamps all over the video so you can skip around to whatever you want to. I also do everything in Google Slides, and if you just want to read through these, those will also be linked in the description. But I do appreciate any viewing time and views so that YouTube treats me right and gives me a little bit of money for all the effort I do. Now, let's get into the meat of it. So first, I want to start off with the Hunter melee buffs. I did already go over these in my melee summary video, but it's nice to see all the changes for each class together. So first, 2 general things. No more decreased effects when stacking. If you have combination blow and like an exotic, you will not lose effects anymore. Effect is the effect forever. But the reason for that is melee buff stacking is now additive, not multiplicative. Now, that's kind of complicated to explain. I have a whole video going into it that is the melee one. It'll also be linked at the end of this, but the gist of it is if you are stacking few buffs, this is going to be a buff for you because they also increase the amounts of every melee buff in the game. But if you're stacking like 4+ buffs, then you're probably going to see a nerf. You won't be doing 9,000% damage anymore. It'll be more like 4,000 or 5,000%, which cool, still really great. Not a huge deal to worry about. Getting into the specific abilities that are affected for Hunters, Stylish Executioner is getting its melee bonus while invisible increased from 200 to 300%. It now works with glaive melees, which is pretty fun. And then it will also work with all powered melee abilities if they hit as you leave invisibility. The example they gave is if you point blank somebody with threaded spike, they will take the full damage, but the other enemies hit by it obviously won't because you'll no longer be invisible. Now, probably the biggest ability buff for Hunters is combination blow. Now, the maximum stacks of this is going from 309% to 400%, which isn't that spicy, but the cool parts are this works with glaives at full effect. And if glaives can build stacks, then this provides infinite healing to your glaives. So you can basically have a very strong, very survivable glaive build as long as you can keep killing stuff. This also now works with Tempest Strike on arc at full effect. Now, a lot of people sleep on Tempest Strike, but it's actually a very underrated melee ability. It's extremely strong. It's great AoE and you can spam it constantly. And if this also builds stacks, that's going to be crazy because you never have to touch combination blow. You just do the giant wave of electricity and wipe stuff out. Lastly, combination blow will also work with grapple melee at full effect, and grapple melee is very strong, and it's technically a grenade and a melee, so it can take both kinds of buffs. If this works how it's intended, that's going to be insane. Now, I would have expected Bungie to say like, hey, we know this is going to be crazy, so we're kind of nerfing this, but I think they're just going to kind of let it ride and see what happens. So definitely think about a grapple melee build because it's going to be really cool and fun probably. As for Hunter's exotic armors, once again, no more decreased effects when stacking. So the 4 that we have are Athros's Embrace. The weighted throwing knife bonuses increase from 200% to 300%. Liar's Handshake and Spirit of the Liar increase their bonus damage from 200% to 400%, which will make those builds very nice. Ophidius Faith, which is a solar exotic will increase the maximum damage bonus to throwing knives from 100% to 200%, and then Triton Vice will increase its glaive damage bonus from 100% to 200%, which is really good. Triton Vice is so much fun. I did a video with 6 different Triton Vice builds in it, and it was a blast to make. So I think Hunters will actually be one of the strongest options for glaives in Edge of Fate, and that exotic's just gonna be a lot of fun. Getting into our exotic reworks, first up is our reload focused ones, the Dragon Shadow and Speedloader Slacks. So first up is Dragon Shadow. Currently, dodging reloads all your weapons, maxes reload and handling, and gives 50 mobility. So now it's going to also boost stability and ready speed, so it's going to be the absolute best weapon support, but it only reloads your equipped weapons. So that's a little bit of a bummer for damage phases, but it will also increase your move speed, sprint speed, slide, and aim down sight strafe speed. So basically what mobility used to do. I don't know if this is boosting the new secret mobility stat that's under the hood, but it's also going to increase your class stat, which is kind of cool. We don't have a lot of these buffs yet because the class stat's very new, so it's interesting to see how that works. But generally, if you just want to move fast, dodge a lot, it's gonna be very solid. Now, if you want to kind of do those things, but you want to do it in a team support way, Speedloader Slacks is it. So currently, what this does is it boosts reload, handling, and airborne effectiveness for you and allies as you get kills and dodge. So now, as you deal sustained damage, it will give class ability energy. Dodging reloads all your weapons and boosts handling and reload for you and allies. And then additional dodges increase the effect. So the kills no longer increase the effect, it's only dodges. So you have to keep dealing damage to get your dodges to help your team. Depending on the way that it builds class ability energy from sustained damage, there's possibly some really cool stuff for your teammates. You could basically be like a mobile rally barricade for your team as long as you keep dodge. So it's kind of a wait and see one, but I think there's some good potential there for some gunplay team support. Moving on to some weapons focused exotics, we have Mask of Bakris and Oathkeepers. So first up is Mask of Bakris. Currently what this does is when you have a Stasis super, your special dodge, which is like a Fallen Captain's Light Shift, will give Arc, Stasis, and Lord of Wolves weapon surges for 4 times 4 for 11 seconds. So that's a 25% weapon damage boost for 11 seconds. This also will lock out your dodge completely for 11 seconds. You can't recharge it, you can't use it at all, and then after that you go back to normal regen. So the changes to this is it now works with an Arc or Stasis super, which is really cool. That gives you some more options. It now stacks up to 3 times, giving a 10% stacking weapon damage bonus to the weapons per stack. So you can get up to 30% damage that stacks with surges and stacks with radiant, which is some pretty crazy damage if you can get all that going. Now, that does mean that you need to do the dodge more frequently, and that brings us to the last point, is that weapon final blows will now give class energy. So as long as they've gotten rid of that 11-second lockout on getting your class ability back at all, this could be really strong, but it is very add clear focus because you have to get weapon kills in order to get the damage. So I don't think you'll see it much in boss fights, but maybe in like some GM activities or add clear stuff, you'll just be zooming around and blasting things. It's worth noting too, because this boosts both Arc and Stasis, the new exotic hand cannon that is Arc and Stasis will be really fun. So I would definitely recommend you check that out. Next up is Oathkeepers. Currently this gives a stacking damage bonus to bows the longer they are held, and it also lets you hold perfect shots indefinitely. So what they've done here is they've increased the maximum damage bonus from 150% to 200%, and they've reworked the curve on it so you get more damage bonus earlier. A lot of people crap on this, but it is literally free damage. If you aim a bow and you wait at all after getting the full shot, it's free damage. So if you're doing slower activities like GMs, all the time you're just aiming is free damage bonus that doesn't really hurt you. Now there's probably spicier stuff, but it does remarkably effective, and if we get some good bows that are in focus this episode, it might be pretty good. I'm looking forward to trying it with Tiku's Divination and maybe the reworked Hierarchy of Needs just to see how it works out. So do keep it in mind, give it a shot. I'll probably make a build with it at some point just because I think it's cool and bows are awesome. Our last 2 exotics are Khepri Sting and Blight Ranger. Khepri Sting right now, well, when you do an unpowered melee, it will drop a snare bomb if you have a charge, and snare bombs also give true sight, which is just a weird perk. There's some weird stuff you could do with it with like grapple melees, but it doesn't do any of that anymore. They just threw out the old perk, and now when you kill a weakened target, it creates a cloud of weakening smoke around them and returns some melee energy. This is basically a weakening Gerfalcon. So instead of shooting an enemy and it's volatile, it's shooting an enemy that's already weakened and spreads weaken to more enemies. I think it's going to work pretty well on the prowl or weapons that naturally weaken. If you have a weapon that already starts weakening, it's going to turn those into AoE. So like Buried Bloodlines, suddenly you have AoE weaken on top of its normal weaken that it provides. I think this could be really fun. I really want to find a way to try this with the new exotic Pulse/Scout rifle that they have, that they've previewed a little bit. I think it'd be really cool with that. Lastly is Blight Ranger. So currently what this does is it lets you block infinitely during Arc Staff Super, and then deactivating creates a large blinding blast and gives 4 times Arc Surge. Now, this exotic has mostly sucked since it came out. It's never really been good. There is one niche use of it where literally you pop your super, you immediately deactivate it, and it blinds everything in the vicinity and gives you 25% Arc Surge. It's a very large area, so this is kind of useful for that, but it's kind of a weird way to use it, and you have so many options. But what they're doing here is they're increasing the blinding blast damage, so it scales faster and more consistently. The maximum damage is increased by 50%, and the minimum damage is increased by 150%. So now if you kind of do that Mimi strategy where you just activate, deactivate, you're going to do 150% more damage on top of it. So you might clear out some trash and then just also have everything blinded, and you and your team can work on them. And with the changes to the super stat, you should be able to get your super back really quickly, so you can get a lot of use out of this. Let's move into some of the subclass changes. So first up is the biggest and probably most controversial one. A lot of hunters have strong feelings about this. What is changing with Gambler's Dodge? First, you don't need to use Gambler's Dodge near enemies to recharge a melee. You could be in the middle of nowhere, there could be not a single enemy around, and if you use it, you'll get melee energy back. Kind of bad news, Gambler's Dodge scales melee energy return based on the melee stat. So if you have generally less than 70, you will not get a full charge back. So what kind of builds does this actually affect? Full melee builds, it's going to do absolutely nothing, because in a full melee build, you'll be building for greater than 100 melee stat, because you want to get that damage bonus that you get at greater than 100 melee stat. The only times I really see this as an issue is builds where melee is kind of used for utility or an afterthought. Now that is several builds, like some endgame builds, you're just throwing something to get radiant and that's it, and that's probably going to hurt just a little bit because now you have to build in a strength and class. But now on the optimistic side, this will actually let you get more than 1 melee charge if you do have 2 charges, and according to Bungie and our testing and some gameplay, it looks about 1.4 charges at 100 melee stat. So that includes Withering Blade, the Stasis melee, Lightweight Knife, Omni-Oculus Snare Bombs, Ophidius Spathe Throwing Knives. Although these already currently give you 2 charges when you dodge, it's part of the exotic perk. We're not sure how this is changing with expansion, so we'll have to kind of test it out and see. This change is likely coming to all refund effects though. Any exotic effects that are like refund a melee are now going to need melee stat to do that. Things where it's like you get a grenade kill and you get a class ability charge back, you're going to need class ability to get that full class ability charge back. This will still hit hunters the most because they have a class ability that uses it. A few things I will say on this. We are getting around 60 to 100 extra stats on class items because those are getting full stats now. So you're getting a lot more points to play with. All of our armor has potential to get even more stats. We have a lot more control over it in Armor 3.0. I know it sounds daunting to get to 70 stats, but it really isn't. The minimum you get in any stats about 25, and then we also have things like fonts, and it's usually not too hard to get there. Definitely think about it. I will say one thing here. The last time I did a hunter video, I had a lot of people complaining and comparing classes and just generally doing the whole class warfare thing in my comments. Don't do that this time. I will delete those comments. I find them very unproductive. If you have constructive thoughts or you're talking about builds, go for it. But if you're just kind of whining and complaining, take it elsewhere. This is not the channel for that. Just move on or take your thoughts to Bungie. They're not looking at my channel. So with that, let's move on. Other hunter changes. These are pretty much all focused on aspects. So first up, the prismatic aspects are changing their fragment slots. Ascension is going from 3 to 2, and Winter Shroud is also going from 3 to 2. I think it's unwarranted. I think it's a dumb way to balance aspects, but it'll be fine. Honestly, prismatic fragments are pretty medium, so I don't think this will hurt most builds too much. Gunpowder Gamble, which is on prismatic and solar, will do 60% less self-damage and progresses on any element kills, not just solar, which will free it up a lot on prismatic. I don't think this will make much difference on solar because so much of solar is built around solar kills, but I think on prismatic it's gonna let you do a lot more stuff. On your mark on solar, which is the aspect that gives you and your team reload speed boosts as you get precision kills, will now have your class ability give 1 stack of on your mark instead of 3. But Final Blow's wall at 3 stacks will now grant you Radiant, so that's another way to access Radiant. You don't necessarily have to take Ember of Torches anymore, which is actually kind of freeing, and on some builds where you're not melee focused, maybe you just don't even build into your melee, so that's definitely more of an option now. But this is Final Blow space, so it's not going to work in boss situations. You won't be able to get Radiant during a boss encounter unless there's a bunch of ads around, but then you're wasting your time. I think it's cool, but I think Hunter design needs to move away from on-kill effects because they are very limiting. Lastly, Ascension, which is on Prismatic and Arc, will finally work with all class ability related mods and Spirit of Utmost Light, and this is huge. This Ascension's a great great ability, but it has been bugged for literally a year. I won't complain, it's great that it's working, I just wish it had come earlier. Starting next season in Edge of Fate, our seasons will be 6 months long, broken into 2 sections, and for each season there will be featured exotic armors and weapons, and all the new gear will be considered featured. Now for armor, what this means is you can get up to a 3% damage resistance per slot, which totals out to 15% damage resistance. So your exotic will only ever account for 3% damage resistance. So if you don't use these, I think you'll be absolutely fine. 3% damage resistance is not going to kill you. But this gives you a list of things that have recently changed, things that they think might be good, and for reference, 4 of these are featured in the 7 builds I'm talking about today. So I think people are a little bit blowing this out of proportion on the armor side. I think the weapons bonuses are a little bit iffy, but I wouldn't worry about this too much. This is kind of fun if you don't know what to play or what to try, or you just want to do a new build. Take a look at these, because most of these are getting touched in some way with the episode, or they have some artifact synergy. Now, let's get into those builds. First up is Gifted Conviction. I love this build. This is the first hunter build I did in episode Heresy with the Arc rework, and it's been great. So if you're not familiar with Gifted Conviction, Ascension and Tempest Strike launch jolting bombs out, and jolting enemies provides up to 50% damage resistance. And this can be from the bombs, it can be from your abilities, it can be from your weapons, it can be from Volt Shot, it can be from literally anything you do. So for me, I really like taking Ascension and Tempest Strike. And the reason I really recommend this in Edge of Fate is because that combination blow change. Tempest Strike will now inherit combination blow, so you can boost the damage of it considerably. So we're going to combo both those abilities. Ascension, as of episode Heresy, works with Gambler's Dodge, so you can just constantly loop back and forth between those. For our fragments, I recommend taking Spark of Resistance because it's damage resistant. Spark of Beacons lets you blind enemies with your weapons as long as they're special or heavy ammo arc weapons, and you are amplified, which you will be constantly. Spark of Discharge will give you Bolt Charge or Ionic Traces. Spark of Ions will generate Ionic Traces when you kill jolted enemies, which is literally everything we ever see. And then targets defeated with Bolt Charge will also make Ionic Traces. If you aren't aware either, Tempest Strike will also be giving you Bolt Charge every time you kill jolted enemies, which once again, we are jolting everything. So it's a very good loop that I think people undervalue a little bit. Lastly, Spark of Frequency is very good, and it lets you get an extra stack of Bolt Charge whenever you gain Bolt Charge. So that'll be from Tempest Strike, that'll be from Spark of Ions, and you'll just be rolling in Bolt Charges that you can discharge pretty quickly with Tempest Strike or Ascension. Lastly, if you for some reason don't drive with one of these fragments, take Spark of Amplitude because it'll generate Orbs of Power when you get rapid kills, and Orbs of Power are how you heal on Arc. For your mods, focus on melee damage, focus on orb generation, and then for the gameplay, just cycle Ascension and Tempest Strike back and forth constantly. It's not too complicated. For the Armor 3.0 stat layout, one thing to note before I get into this, I have a spreadsheet of all the Armor 3.0 stat layouts for every one of these builds, and I will link it in the description. You can see the resulting stats here. I've gotten to about 166 melee and 140 super. To do that, I'm using 2 Paragon, 2 Grenadier, and 1 Brawler archetype, and I'm actually using 3 font mods in this because once you use one, it's not much more cost to maintain the armor charges for it. So we're doing melee, we're doing super, and we're doing class ability because we want that class ability constantly looping, and we want the extra melee damage and the extra super damage. With the fonts, every single one of the cooldowns is lower. You will note though that if we didn't have any of these fonts, we would actually have lower cooldowns than current because we would still be over 70 in all 3 of those stats. The main thing here with the fonts is we are trying to boost the damage. Currently, fonts give 30 extra stat for 1 copy, and that is expected to stay the same because Bungie hasn't said anything, but that will be something to check. The result of this is we are getting just under 120% melee damage, and I forgot to mention this before, but the melee stat boost is multiplicative, whereas every other melee stat boost is additive. So that is actually a huge boost, as high as you can get that. We're also boosting our super damage to 118.5%, which is very good if you use Arc Staff or use Gathering Storm. Both of them are great supers. Sorry, Storm's Edge. That's pretty much it. This is a really fun build. I think it's going to be much stronger with Stat 3.0 because there's just so much you can do and so much you can just amp up every level of this. The next build is a Solar Star Eater build, and this kind of came out of the featured exotic list. I saw Star Eater scales was in the list, and I love Star Eater scales. Do you know how many Star Eater builds I've done this episode? I've done 4 Star Eater scales builds just this episode because it is a fantastic exotic for hunters if you want to do great damage. And because it gives you so much damage, you can really focus on some support elements in the build. If you're not familiar with what Star Eater Scales does, it gives you 2% extra super energy on orbs, unless you pick Golden Gun. If you pick Golden Gun, that drops to 0.5%. As you collect orbs after your super is charged, you gain stacks of Feast of Light up to 6, and at 6 stacks you get 70% extra super damage, and that is great. And the reason this is exciting in Edge of Fate is that we can stack that with the buff from having a high super stat to get an extra up to 45% damage, and having a super stat over 70 will also juice that 2% extra super energy on orbs even higher, so you can get your super faster and it hits even harder. Now as for the build, we take Knock 'em Down to make Blade Barrage stronger. We take On Your Mark because it's good team support and it gives us more fragment slots. For our fragments, we take Ember of Benevolence so that we can get some more ability regen as we buff our allies. We take Ember of Torches so that when we throw our melee, we get Radiant, which is good for us and teammates. They will also be getting Radiant as well. We take Ember of Empyrean to extend any restoration or Radiant effects as we get solar kills. We take Ember of Solace so that restoration and Radiant last longer. And we take Ember of Searing so that we can generate fire sprites as we kill scorched enemies and get some melee energy back. If for some reason you are not in a team or you don't want one of these fragments, I also recommend Ember of Singeing because your class ability will be very helpful. For abilities, I recommend Healing Grenade. It's just going to be good for survival and just give you a good source of restoration and let you help out your team. Knife Trick is my favorite solar melee, and then Gambler's Dodge is obviously very good on the class. The mods are really simple, focus on orbs and super energy. We're all focused on the super here. And then we are also taking a font of super so that we can boost the super damage. For the gameplay, focus on your powered melees to get your super. That's the easiest way to make a lot of orbs, and it's infinitely rechargeable as long as you're Radiant with Knock 'em Down. So it's a really easy loop to get to that super fast. You can see the stats here and all the different benefits. The grenade and melee regen are boosted here by a good bit. Our class regen is dead even with what it is right now. We are getting a 35% super damage boost and additional super regen, and just all around really solid. This is using 4 Paragon and 1 Grenadier archetypes. I'm also using 1 grenade and 1 super font for this. If you don't decide you need the grenade as much, you could put a melee font on to get a little bit of extra damage on your melee. That's definitely something to consider depending on the power level you're playing at. The biggest thing I want to draw your attention to is kind of at the bottom of this left table. The orbs of power. A standard orb of power from like a siphon is 2.5%. That will now be 3.5%. The Star Eater orb of power bonus is 2%. That goes up to 2.85%. So you're setting at about 6.4% energy on most orbs. Sources like attrition orbs are worth a lot less for the base power, but the 2% still applies. So you'll be getting supers very quickly. I'm using this Blade Barrage because of the penalty to Celestial Nighthawk, and a lot of people bag on Blade Barrage, but it is actually very strong. It is one of the highest DPS supers in the game as long as all the blades hit. So on some small bosses, it will not work, but for most bosses, that's not an issue. You just land the blades and it's going to do great damage. And it's also good for ad clear if you're doing activities like that. So you just get it, build up some stacks, and then just destroy some stuff. It's a very good build. It's probably one of my favorite of the Star Eater builds I did. Next up, I've got several Prismatic builds, and first is the Prismatic Mask of Bakris build. So as I mentioned earlier, Mask of Bakris has a special dodge that will give you Arc, Stasis, and Lord of Wolves damage boost. And this stacks with Radiant, it stacks with Weapon Surges, and then kills will give class energy. So for our aspects, we're gonna take Winter's Shroud because that'll give us an access to very quick class regen. We get plus 300% base class ability regen every time we slow an enemy, which we can do pretty frequently. We can do that with our super, with our grenade. We can do it with a choke club weapon. Lots of options there. And then for the second aspect, I'm taking Gunpowder Gamble. Really, that's mostly by default. Ascension doesn't work with this. Threaded Spectre will slow down your class regen even more. Stylish Executioner doesn't really synergize and will also cut your total fragment count down to 4 instead of 5. And I don't like that a whole lot. For the fragments though, I recommend Faceted Protection. That will give you damage resistance. Faceted Purpose will give you either Frost Armor or Bolt Charge, depending on which super you take. Facet of Hope will give you class ability regen, depending on how many elemental buffs you have, which we should be able to keep up pretty frequently. Facet of Dawn will be our access to Radiant. That will give us 5 seconds of Radiant, which is a 20% weapon damage boost when we get powered melee hits. Facet of Solitude lets you sever enemies by landing rapid precision hits, which is just a great debuff for survivability. You can also think about Facet of Balance. This will just let you get some ability energy back, or you can think about maybe something like Facet of Awakening or Command for reload or different pickups. For the super, you have to take either a Stasis or an Arc super, so take Silence and Squall or Storm's Edge. I like Silence and Squall. People don't think about its damage very much, but it's pretty solid and it doesn't take much time to throw, and it will keep your class ability regenerating constantly thanks to those slow procs. For the grenade, I like Duskfield Grenade just to keep proccing Winter's Shroud. Snare Bomb is very good to provide weaken, but this melee is very flexible, so pick whatever makes sense for you. For the class ability, I recommend Gambler's Dodge. Currently, Acrobat Dodge does not work with this. If it does, it might be worth it, but it will increase your cooldown pretty considerably. So keep an eye out if that bug does get fixed, but right now it just completely blocks out the special dodge. For the mods, just focus on weapon damage and support, and then create orbs and get super energy. The gameplay, just build up your dodge, get kills, pretty straightforward. You're just going to zoom around and shoot stuff. For the stat comparison, we have very strong classic grenade regen. We've got some really good weapon damage boosts. We're getting that weapon stat up to 154 because it's a weapon build, but we are also making sure that we get grenade and super to at least 70 so that we don't take any penalties there, and we want to get class ability up to 100 so we can get maximum class regen. That's going to take our Winter Shroud class regen from 300% to 427.5% base regen, and that is very helpful. We're also getting our class ability cooldown from 22 seconds down to 19 seconds, just the absolute lowest we can get to. Beyond that, it's not very complicated. We are focusing a little bit on building energy, but the main focus is weapons here, so we're just going to keep moving around that. To hit the stats, we are taking 3 gunner archetypes and 2 specialist archetypes, and then I'm also taking 1 font of super for 30 stat there, just to kind of help round things out a little bit. It's not super necessary, but I just don't like taking a penalty on supers, and because they're so generally useful. Really excited to play with this. I really want to try it out with that new exotic hand cannon that's Arcane Stasis, because you can just constantly get those boosts on both of them, and I think that'd be cool. The one downside of the rework though is you now have to juggle your own surges, but that's fine. Getting a 30% damage boost that stacks and works on all those things is better than 25% weapon surges. So the next build is focused on the combination blow grapple punch combo. This is going to be using an exotic class item with Spirit of Inmost Light, and then you can either use Syntheseps for more melee damage or Spirit of Seared Arachne for Woven Mail uptime. Both those are very good perks, so whichever one you have, that's great. And honestly, if you want to focus on the melee damage fully, Syntheseps is your best bet, and you don't necessarily need Inmost Light, so just use what you can. For the aspects here, I take Winter Shroud and Threaded Spectre. Because we'll be leaning on combination blows sometimes, we'll get our class ability back instantly, so we don't really need to worry about the penalty of Threaded Spectre. And Winter Shroud will also just give us some crowd control on enemies as we dodge with Gambler's Dodge. For our fragments, we take Facet Protection and Purpose for the damage resistance. We take Facet of Blessing so that every time we get a melee final blow, we start healing. Take Facet of Dawn to get free Radiant off of all those powered melee blows. And then we're going to take Facet of Dominance, which is because there's a weird interaction where if you have combination blow, it turns the grapple punch into an arc grenade, and it will also jolt. So now when you punch things, it'll be very strong. It'll jolt enemies, it'll heal you, it'll give you Radiant. It does a ton of things because grapple melee is really cool. One that I haven't tried in a while is Facet of Courage. Because grapple grenade gets converted to an arc ability by combination blow, this might apply, and because grapple grenade still applies Unravel, it should instantly get the 10% damage bonus or 50% additive melee damage bonus. I'm not sure what grapple grenade's going to get, so that could be a really cool one, but it's just a little bit iffy. Generally for the gameplay, just do combo blow, punch things, then do 1-2 punch shotgun, and then do grapple melees for bigger targets or when you need to be mobile. I play this build at the beginning of Final Shape and it's very strong. It was strong then, strong now. It's going to be much stronger in Edge of Fate. And the reason for that is because of the stat. So we've got better grenade and melee regen. The regen on Inmost Light is complicated. It depends on the other abilities. So like melee will regen when you use class ability or grenades, and it goes up to 800% for melee and grenade, and it goes up to 50% for class ability, which is sad. The main event here though is that our melee damage is boosted by about 9%, and then we're also getting our super damage up by about 20%. Now in a perfect world, I would rather have less super and more grenade, but because of how archetypes work and balance out, it just doesn't really work out that way. If you want to focus less on combo blow and more on grapple grenade, you could definitely switch around some archetypes there to do that. I think there's a lot of ways to build this, but we kind of got to feel it out and see how things work. For the archetypes right now, I'm taking 4 Paragon and 1 Grenadier. Unfortunately, the primary melee archetype is called Brawler, and it boosts health, which is I think the least valuable stat in PvE. So we go to Paragon, which has melee as secondary, and that kind of covers it instead. I'm also taking a Font of Melee for an extra 30 stat there, but you could definitely push that over to Grenade if that bonus seems more helpful. And you could even really run both, though you're going to have to give up some mod there. Generally pretty straightforward. I think this can be really fun, and I think everybody should try this out at least once if it works anywhere near as good as we're expecting. Moving on to our last Prismatic build. This is a Celestial Nighthawk build. In my previous Hunter video, I did a Solar Celestial Nighthawk build, but I figured I'd cover Prismatic. So if you're not familiar with the Celestial Nighthawk, it is a very old but very solid exotic, and it will convert your golden gun shot to one single stronger shot, and it will also give you super energy on precision weapon kills. For the aspects with this, I'm going to take Ascension and Threaded Spectre. Ascension gives you Amplified, which is damage resistance, and it makes it harder for enemies to target you, and does that for you and nearby allies. Then Threaded Spectre will take aggro off of you by creating a clone, and it will create it in the air with Ascension, which is really cool because enemies can't run up to it and detonate it, so it'll last longer. This just gives you good survivability and that kind of end game content that you would want to bring this to. For the grenade, I'm just kind of picking Dustfield Grenade because there's a artifact perk that boosts solar weapon damage on darkness debuffed enemies, but this is pretty flexible. Steer Bomb is really good because it is a weakening effect and it's very accessible. And then we take Gambler's Dodge or Acrobat Dodge. Generally, I would go with the Gambler's Dodge if you know you're getting Radiant during your damage phase from like a well, because you need the Radiant to do extra Golden Gun damage. But if you don't have that, Acrobat Dodge will give you a good solid Radiant for around 11 seconds. For our fragments, we take Protection and Purpose. You're noticing a trend here probably. We definitely want to take Facet of Courage because that'll also give us 10% extra damage on our super if there's a darkness debuff on the boss. Take Facet of Solitude, so as we're landing crits, we are also debuffing the boss. And you can take Facet of Grace if you're using a kinetic weapon. That will give you bonus Transcendence energy as you kill things with kinetic weapons. Or you can take Facet of Dawn to get one more source of Radiant. There is also going to be an artifact perk that gives you Radiant this episode, so that is another way there. Gameplay is really simple: land precision weapon kills and Golden Gun any big target. For the stat, we are very, very focused on our super, obviously. We take a slight hit on grenade and class energy, but the class cooldown even ends up being very similar. And because of how the stats have been reworked a little bit, even our grenade cooldown is a little bit shorter. So that is one bonus to the stats kind of being scaled so that there's greater effects above 70 than there were previously. The main event here though is we're getting 39.2% extra super damage. We are just shy of the full max, and that is because we are trying to balance out our stats a little bit. We're taking 3 Paragon, 1 Specialist, and 1 Gunner archetype, and we're taking 1 Font of Super to help out there. If you fully dump everything else, you can definitely get to 200, but it's probably going to hurt and you won't see your abilities very often, so not something I super recommend. Once again, not very complicated. Also, I've seen a lot of people focusing on the weapon stat, but it's a lot of investment for not a lot of damage, and when I've done the math, super makes way more sense. There's going to be some very rare situations where weapons will win out, but it's like a smaller fire team fights against raid bosses or insanely long damage phases like Caretaker. But even then, if it's a very long damage phase, you can probably get your super back, especially with a super stat over 100. So I think super is the most valuable stat. You can get some weapons that'll give you some bonuses, but getting it all the way to 200 is going to just nuke everything else on your build, and it's going to be for 10% extra damage, which doesn't seem worth it. Overall, I think this will remain a very strong option for hunters for DPS phases, and it's probably going to come up in the raid race. Moving over to solar, another build that I went over previously in my last video is Youngahamkro's Spine. I'm not going to go through everything here. This is a very standard build. We use Gunpowder Gamble, knock them down, and we're focused on Trip Mine Grenade, and we're just trying to regen our grenade as often as possible by getting solar ability hits. So that includes your melee, it includes the Gunpowder Gamble, and the Trip Mine Grenades themselves. So the stat build for this is really straightforward, and we can actually get the 200 grenade stat because we just take 5 Grenadier archetypes, and then we run 1 Grenadier font with a few stat mods in there. Everything in this build is an improvement except for the class regen. We take a little bit of hit on the class stat, but we don't super need it, and we'll have so much stuff pushing class energy back that it should be fine. And we've also got our melee stat decently high up, so we should be able to just regen that naturally too without Gambler's Dodge. We're getting a little bit of a super damage buff too, but that's really just a result of our archetypes. But yeah, 65% extra grenade damage is going to make this feel very strong, and then getting more grenade regen from all sources. The grenade energy refund from Youngahamkro's Spine will go from 33% to 47% on solar ability hits, which isn't quite enough to get you there in 2 kills, but if you have some other mods in the system, or your regen is boosted by, say, Ember of Benevolence, that's going to be very strong. Overall, those can be very cool. Definitely recommend you try this out if you are a hunter player in Edge of Fate. Our last build is Stasis Mask of Fealty. Once again, I went over this in the previous video, so I won't go into too much detail with it, but if you aren't aware, Mask of Fealty creates stasis crystals when Withering Blades bounce, and it returns 7.5% fixed melee energy on every bounce. This is extremely strong. It creates a lot of damage, and I think it works best on Stasis, though you can use it on Prismatic as well. We take Winter Shroud and Grim Harvest, so we're going to make those Stasis shards, and we are also going to get a faster class ability regen. You can read the rest of this and pause if you want to, but let's just get over the stats so you can see what the really cool parts of this are. This is one of the best examples of Gambler's Dodge returning more than one melee charge, so we get 1.4 melee charges every time we dodge, and we have 2 melee charges by default, so we'll get that fully topped out. We are also going to be using Winter's Shroud, which will get boosted from 400% to 570% class regen. Our melee energy from Stasis shards will go from 8% to 11.4% for every Stasis shard, and we're making them constantly. Whisper of Refraction, if you kill any Stasis debuffed enemies, that is another 10% class ability energy. Then we're able to get more grenade energy, more class energy, more grenade energy. It's just because of the stats, because once again, we're just getting everything possible. This is already an extremely fun build, and I think it's going to be even stronger. Right now, all I'm using on this is 1 font of class for 30 stats on that, and that's to give us a little bit of overshield every time we dodge, which should be pretty constantly. But there's a lot of flexibility in here. You could take an extra melee font and get some more melee damage in here. You could get a grenade font in there to just round that out so you don't take any penalties. Lots of ways to work with it. Very flexible. This build's going to be really great. You'll be throwing out shurikens more than you can believe. So I think it's really good, and just getting even better like most of these. Now with that is all the builds I have for today. I think there's some really solid buffs in here. Some older on the melee front. The additive versus multiplicative rework is going to make some old or more medium melee builds very strong. Some of the very wild stacking will be boosted down, but honestly I don't think most people are doing them. I think they're mostly clickbait YouTube video kind of things, or weird niche strategies where you need like 3 teammates supporting you to make it happen. Stats are going to be very important in Armor 3.0. You can't just slap on the same loadout every time. You really need to make them sync up with your build. It's going to be hard to pick between stats. You're going to have to do some trade-offs and make some decisions. And it's not just hunters. I've recently done warlocks, I've recently done titans, and it is hard sometimes to balance out all the stats. On that note, fonts will potentially be strong. Those give you stats while you have armor charge, and if they still provide 30, 50, or 60 for 1, 2, or 3 copies, that's going to be very helpful in Armor 3.0. Now, if you use your Armor 3.0 stats really well, they're going to enhance every single one of your builds. You're going to feel better than you do now. I don't think people should worry about that. I think it's going to be very easy to reach that. I think tier 3 should be very accessible. That's what I've built everything with here. And even without, like, you're not taking that much penalty. I've done builds on 4 of the featured exotics in this video, but remember, these only account for 3% damage reduction. I would not sweat it on the exotic armor side. I do still hope they change their mind on the weapon side, because 10% I think is still too much, but hopefully it won't be in every activity and it won't be too big of a deal. Thank you for watching. That has been a lot of information, but I hope it's helped you. We are very close to the edge of fate. By the time this video is out, it'll be just over a week, so that's very exciting. I'm super amped to make tons of builds and finally understand exactly how all the armor stats work, so that'll be very cool. As we wrap up, I just want to thank my supporters. I want to thank specifically my channel members Louis, Equitas, Mirage, Sushi Juice, Maddie the Ace, Davey0011, Infernal Park 111, Aradriel. I really appreciate you guys supporting the channel and making it a little bit easier for me to do this and make it. I would also like to give a special thanks to Spider Reviver. He's been checking my math. You might still see some errors because I didn't get a chance to have him check everything, but those are on me, not on him, so don't blame him for that. If you're enjoying the content, definitely subscribe. I'm trying to get to 5,000 subscribers before Edge of Fate launches, and I'm not too far off now. I've had a lot of great growth on the channel. It's been really cool, and I really appreciate it. If you want to support me in some way just to help make this easier and show your appreciation, I do appreciate that, but don't feel pressured. I will be okay. With all that, thank you for watching and hope to see you in Edge of Fate.